Hello everybody and welcome to this webinar on the new features of FiberPlanIT version 1.10 that we released earlier this year. My name is Jonas Versteft. I'm a marketing manager at Comsoft for FiberPlanIT and I'll be presenting today. A short agenda for the webinar of today. I'll start off with a very short, very brief introduction. Then I'll jump right into demonstration of the new features in Simulator and Designer. I'll also touch upon some topics for the future of Comsoft and FiberPlanIT that might be interesting for you. And at the end, I'll try to answer as many questions as possible. I expect this webinar to take around 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the amount of questions we have at the end as well. So you can ask your questions via the GoToWebinar Q&A window, which should be located on the right-hand side of your screen. And please feel free to ask your questions throughout the session. I'll cover as many as possible at the end. After the webinar, you will be redirected to a web page where you'll get a short survey, 5 or 6 questions. It would be very helpful for us if you could fill that in. Then later this week, so tomorrow, you can expect an email with the recording of the session, so you can watch it again or share it with your colleagues that could not attend today. So normally you should already know Comsoft and FiberPlanIT. So I'm still located in Ghent in Belgium, but since last year we also have an office in Toronto in Canada, focusing on the North American and South American market. So that's something that is maybe new to some people. Now I'm immediately getting started in demonstration. So first of all, I'll demonstrate some new things in Simulator, specifically two simulators, so related to area preparation. And then I'll do a demo on some new functionality in FiberPlanIT Designer, focusing on some new features in automatic input processing, and also focusing on new things we added in the rules, so new supported architectures and rule settings, which also apply to the simulator, of course. So let's get started. All right, so one of the things I want to show in the simulator is a new feature on area preparation. So we added new functionality to load in a larger area. So here you see example dataset I will use for this demonstration. So this is an area of, I think, around let me check, around 17,000 demand points. And if I take a look here, I identify certain clusters beforehand, and we can use the simulator to create different workspaces from this data. So create an area for each of these clusters. Let me show you how we can do that. So when creating a new area, we can choose to give it a name here. We can create a new area. Well, I'll only focus on the mandatory input files here. So I'll load in demand points. from my larger area and the street center lines. And there's an option to cut out the area, create different sub-areas based on an input polygon file. So this is the file that I showed you before. Now we can create an area based on these input files. What it will do is it will cut up the streets, cut up the demand points. It will take a buffer for the streets so that in case the polygons cut some streets in half at some dead-end streets, for example, can still be taken into account, and it will create different sub-areas, as you can see, fully automatically. Let me just cancel this here. So as you can see, it creates different areas, all creating its own demand points and street center lines, and breaking everything up according to the polygons that we specified in the input file. So this can be very handy. So I'm switching here to another workspace that I prepared beforehand, where I have all my areas already configured. So by loading this larger areas, you can get all of your different sub areas, and you can immediately calculate your plan for all of these areas all at once. So if you specify particular rule set, and in the areas you select all areas, you can run a calculation for every single area at once and get the results here in one go. So it can speed up the process a bit more, saves you some work in preparing the area. Another thing I wanted to show here related to the area processing is creating an area from a designer workspace. So if you have designer and simulator, you can use the designer to maybe pre-process your area, make some fine-tunings in the input data. And then you can choose here in simulator to load it in automatically as well. So instead of having to specify every single input file again, you can just choose the designer workspace and create an area based on this workspace. So you see immediately this workspace is added to your to the area to the areas here. All right. So that was everything I wanted to show related to the simulator. So in version 1.10, some new features has been added in the rules, but I'll cover these in the designer demo. As you know, this is the rules are the same between designer and simulator. All right, now let's switch to the designer. Now, one of the things that we added for designer related to the automatic input processing is, so we have a create polls function. So that's not new, but the way that the polls are created are much smarter now. So if you have an area where you don't have any existing pole infrastructure, but you want to do an aerial design placing new poles, you want to place the poles on one side of the street, the software can automatically generate these poles, and the placement will take into consideration the locations of the buildings. So poles will only be placed, if you choose one street, will be placed at the side of the street where there are most of the buildings are located. So here we can see good examples. So poles are located on the left side of the street where we have all the buildings. If we look for another example, here as well, so the poles are on the inside of this curb. And here as well, here exactly the same. So this pole placement has improved in version 1.10, and one of the things we added in 1.10, so if you go plugins window in FiberPlanIT Designer, there is a way to create batch commands now. So you still have the ability to generate do the input processing one by one via the toolbar here, but there's also a way to create batch commands, and that allows you to do a couple of pre-processing steps one after the other. So if you don't need to do any fine-tuning in particular or make any changes, you just want to do all the input processing at once, and maybe even completely process the area and calculate already, you have that ability now in Designer to do that. So for this example here, I'll do all the input pre-processing steps, and let's see what comes out of it. So it follows the natural order of the input processing. Starts with calculating location of the trenches. The buried lead-ins are being created afterwards. Then our transitions are being created, crossings, and the aerial processing steps. So as you can see here, we now have all of the input data prepared for a calculation already. Now, what I will do is I'll zoom in into some areas to show some particular things that also changed in the latest release, or maybe already in 1.9, but maybe you're not aware of it. So one of the things that we changed is if you have building polygon information in your area, then the possible trenches following the streets that are being generated can automatically avoid these building polygons. So as you can see here, this street is more narrow than this particular street because the software is trying to avoid these buildings already. So there is a way on the streets to identify what the street width is, but if that data is not available, then the software can also automatically avoid particular buildings. Same is happening here. So that is a newly added option. Now, another thing that we added is, something small here. So for dead-end streets, it's possible to have, instead of having a straight end of the street, it's possible to have a more rounded street end, a cul-de-sac, for dead ends, and that's something that is configurable. So yeah, the way that it's being created, how round it is, or how wide it is, can be configured as well. Now, something that we changed related to the lead-ins in version 1.10 is a way to do priority lead-ins. So if I go here to an example, it's possible to set priorities to the lead-ins. What does it mean? You can choose to do the lead-in directly to the newly created possible trench, but you can also drop directly to maybe existing manholes or to existing pipes, and you can set a priority for this. So you can choose whether it should first drop to an existing manhole or an existing pipe, or to a trench, so that these lead-ins are created automatically. So here we did not drop to the pipes, but creates a drop to the manhole, which is the preferred option. And there's also a way to create to set the cutoff distance for every single lead-in. Now, something that we changed related to the aerial connections. So let me switch off the underground lead-ins and the possible trenches. So one of the things that we changed, again, if you have building polygons in your that you use in your design, the aerial connections can automatically avoid these buildings. So here we would assume that this is the aerial connection that should be created, so between this pole here and this pole here. But because of the building location, it will not create this aerial connection and will try to find a different route. Again, it's possible to change the aerial connections manually after this creation before you do design, but this functionality is trying to help you get to an initial design as quickly as possible, which is feasible. Something related to the aerial lead-ins is configuration setting that has been added for quite some time, but you may not be aware of it, is you can configure whether aerial connections can cross the street or not. Here it's configured that it's not allowed, so it will only create aerial connections to the buildings on the same side of the street. That's one of the things that was changed. Now, let me show you something else that we changed related to the input processing or input preparation. So I'll switch here to another workspace where I'll show one of the new features we did for creating drop trenches per two buildings. So what this button does is it creates a pair drop. So per two buildings that are located side by side, it will drop to the same point. So before it was dropping directly to the possible trench, and then in later stages in your design, the drop point could be located there. Now we added in an option that is a configurable option to have an offset for that exact drop location. So if I take a look here, so instead of dropping directly, sharing the drop directly to the possible trench, it is now possible to configure this offset here that we have a couple of meters where the drops coincide and where a drop point might be located. So these are all of the features that we added related to the input data. Now let's get back to this workspace and let's take a look at what changed related to the design rules. For this, I'll open the design rules and switch to my design view so I can show you the effect immediately between the design rules and the output. Now, one of the things that was added in the latest version was a support for lenient aerial cables. So what does this mean? This means that if in your design you have aerial and underground mixed, and you move from an aerial connection to a underground connection, before it would always splice the cables coming up or down the pole. But now it's possible to continue with the cable that was used for aerial, and to continue with this cable underground. So if I take a look to see what this would look like. So for example, take a look at the distribution cable here where I have this option set. Here we have a connection between this pole and this pole. So an aerial cable is running here, trying to feed this drop point. Now, if I check this distribution cable, you can see that this is one aerial cable, which is continuing up until the drop point. And this drop point is not located on a pole. This is an underground drop point. So if I show you the possible route, so this is purely on the underground part, that this cable is continuing as an aerial cable. This is one of the new settings that you can configure if this is needed in your design. So something else we changed related to the cables. So for all of the layers, it's possible to add extra length for the cables. So separately for aerial cables and for buried cables, you can configure what extra length you want in the bill of material. And if we take a look at this bill of material, I can show you what this looks like if you configure this. So for our distribution cables, we can then see what the total cable length is for each type of cable. But we also get a new line here stating what the over length is for each cable based on what was configured and based on how much cabling is needed for each type. All right. So one of the major features that we added in the latest release is the support for ring calculations in the feeder layer. So before it was only possible to select direct cable strategy or shared cable strategy, but now with the new release it's possible to also do feeder ring calculations. And there's a couple of new settings that you can use to get the desired output. So you can configure how many rings you would want. You can balance the weight of the two rings, so the size of the rings or the amount of ohms that both of the rings, in this case 2 rings, so both of the rings are feeding, can be balanced based on ohms or based on fibers. Then there's also some settings related to the branch cables, so it's possible to branch off or to configure that branching is allowed from the rings. You can configure the branch distance, the branch cable size, the maximum branch cable size, and also how many points can be fed by a branch cable. And you can also configure to have open rings instead of a closed ring. So closed ring would start at the same central office, but for open rings it's possible to connect connect all of the fibers through from one central office to the other central office. So based on your type of architecture, this is now configurable. And there's also a way to have the ring strategy drawn in. So after an automatic calculation, you have the capability to change the strategy to drawn cables, and then you have the option to manually move the route of the cables or to indicate yeah, which distribution points should be fed by which cable. So there's a lot more control on the ring strategy. As you can see in our in the view, there's also some additional information here related to those rings that will help you to visualize your design. So if I zoom out here, so as we configured 2 rings, we can see ring number 1 in purple and ring number 2 in yellow here, which are being automatically calculated. And then we can identify our branch cables and our cables that are part of the ring structure. Now, to enable this extended view, this is also something that I want to show. So when initializing a workspace, it's important, if you want to work with support ring strategies, it's important when initializing the workspace that you choose for an advanced template. So this advanced template enables helps with a proper design view for the feeder rings, and adds also layers for primary distribution and for backbone layers. So I briefly mentioned it, but now also it's possible to do calculations with the backbone layer, so connecting different central offices with a ring or with any other feeder strategy. That's also supported now. All right. So let me switch to the other workspace now to show some other rule settings that we introduced in version 1.10. So here we have our input view workspace, and one of the things which can be quite useful is the support for multiple design rules. So it is possible to identify parts of your workspace that should follow a different rule. For example, if you have a workspace with a more dense area and with a more rural part, then you can identify these parts of the workspace and configure a different rule set in the design rules that should be followed for these parts. So here we have configured 2 parts which follows rules 2. Now if we have a look at our design rules, we have our standard rule set, which is identified to be to be used, and I have a rules 2, so the same name is just being used in the rules and material, and this rules 2 will be applied to my other area. Now the main difference for this demo that I chose is capacity of the distribution layer, the distribution point. So here in my standard rule set, I have a capacity of 256 fibers, while in my rules 2, I set a smaller capacity, so only 32 fibers. So if I take a look at the design output here, you can see that outside of these 2 boundaries, we have larger distribution clusters which are being calculated. Let me zoom in a bit to make it more clear. So we have a larger distribution clusters, size 200, while within these 2 areas we have smaller distribution clusters following the configured rule set. Important to note is that both these parts will be fed by the same feeder cable. So there's only one central office in this area, and the feeder cables are feeding all of these different distribution points from this location. So there's no need to have different central offices depending on yeah, the different areas you identify that use a different rule set. No, only one central office will be needed. Now, let's go through a couple of other things that were changed. One of the things that we did was related to the splitter scheme. So before, you could choose your splitter scheme that should be used, so type of splitter. This did not change, but now it's possible to have spare slots in your splitters. So if you want to keep spare slots, it's now possible to choose how many should be kept, and the software takes that into account when placing the splitters. Now, one of the major changes in the rule sets, what we now support is related to the demand layer, so related to the buildings and the homes. What we can support is multiple demand types. So within your input data, you can set a demand type for each and every single demand point. So here we have our standard rule to follow. So standard rule is that every building, every demand point gets one active PON connection and one active point-to-point. But we identified other demand types in our input data, so demand type 1 and 2, and we can change the amount of fibers that are required for these points in our rule sets. Also, there's now the possibility to configure in-building costs. So we can now model in-building costs and output this in the bill of material as well. So you can configure a set of rules for in-building costs. What's important to note, so there's a way to add a floor count now to the demand point. So the floor count can be added to your input data. So in the demand points, per demand point, you can specify a different floor count. And here you can configure the rules for the in-building costs. So depending on the floor count range, you can set a different rule. You can configure a different rule and configure the specifications of the building as well. And then related to the cabling and the ducts, you can also here specify the cost for this equipment, the ducts, the horizontal and vertical costs, same for distribution, and the same for your cables as well. Now, let me show you what this looks like in the bill of material. So in the bill of material, you would see here the in-building cables and the in-building ducts as well within your home section, which will now be added. So it's a way to account for the in-building costs already in the high-level design. Now, one of the other things that we added in version 1.10 was a way to specify which equipment should be placed for the drop points and for the distribution points. So you can configure which type of equipment should be placed there. By default, for the drop layer, a drop box will be placed for the buried part, aerial drop box for the aerial drop points. But in this case, I also specified a handhole, that a handhole should be placed for the buried part. And what you will see in the output, if we take a look at one of the drop points here, that at a drop point, both a handhole and a drop box will be placed. You will see the same in the bill of material. What we also added was support for fixed cable lengths and connectorized cables in the drop layer. So for drop cables, you can specify that the cables have a fixed length. So in case, this is offered like this from your equipment vendor, you can specify which type of cables you have, so which lengths of cables that are available, and then the software chooses which type of cable will be needed. And then also in the bill of material, you will see for each type of cable, so for the different lengths, you will see how many meters of cable will be required. All right, so this was basically everything that I wanted to show related to the new features. Let me get back to the presentation and show you a bit more general information on FiberPlanIT and what's to come in the coming months or years even. So for FiberPlanIT, what I focused on today was simulator and designer. As you might be aware, we also introduced FiberPlanIT Engineer, more for low-level design, in the beginning of the year. And what's interesting to know is that for the whole end-to-end process, we work with a number of partners focusing on physical inventory, mobile survey tools, demand aggregation tools that can help you in your fiber project. So please feel free to ask if you have any questions on particular partner tools. Now, related to engineer, like I said, engineer is focusing on the low-level design, and what's important to mention here is that engineer is being used to take a design that's calculated with FiberPlanIT Designer, and where you can configure a set of also a set of design rules, meaning the naming conventions that should be used, the labeling, the cable configuration, splicing rules that should be followed. The engineer takes all of this into account when converting the design into a low-level design and to build plan. And with this output, you can feed information to your construction teams to go and build the network. If you want more information related to that and then see a demo, there's a webinar available. So please feel free to ask if you want to get the link. Now, one of the things that we are working on is the calculation server, it's called. So the basic concept is that it would be possible to run designer or simulator calculations in the cloud, so no longer locally. Mainly used for it would be mainly used for larger area calculations where you don't want to use the resources of your own computer, or if you have an older PC, for example, that's not able to handle the calculations, or a non-Windows PC, then you could use the calculation server to run calculations in the cloud. So if you're interested in this solution, please ask me about it. Then the interface, so it would work with standard designer or simulator interface, or it could be used as an integration again with third-party applications, like we're doing already today with designer. Now, another thing I'd like to mention is something related to synergy planning. So one of the things that we get asked a lot now from or what we see in the market today is that there's a need for fiber within the operator within the different divisions of the operator. So for fiber to the antenna, or fiber to the business, or to the home. So there's a lot of different projects running all at the same time, and we see need to yeah, bring these projects together and make sure that we can generally optimize these kind of projects. To give you an example, is for example, if an operator gets a question from an enterprise customer, wants a point-to-point fiber, you could use FiberPlanIT to do a automated design within minutes, get a first cost estimation. But where it becomes a lot more interesting is if you can use the outcome of this calculation, or use the information on other projects within this exercise. So if this question comes from the customer, you can then maybe also identify other opportunities in the area, or maybe you already have interested customers in the area for a fiber connection. So you can really look at all of the projects and all the needs for fiber at the same time. So the demand for this one point-to-point fiber connection, or maybe multiple fiber connections, could then influence the plan for fiber to the home, which might take place in the same area. So really get rid of the different verticals within an operator, but have one environment, one platform for all the fiber needs within the operator. So that's something where we would like to play a role, where you can have FiberPlanIT to really be the platform in between the different projects, and globally optimize the deployment costs for these different projects, and help the operator to speed up his time to market by getting immediate feedback on the cost on the spot. He can really help his enterprise customers very fast, and then also manage the rollout plans and timings across these different fiber projects. Now, other topic which we are focusing on. So next to our FiberPlanIT solution, we are doing quite some research into other parts of doing research in other utility sectors, so related to district heating networks, smart grid communication networks, and electricity networks. This is something where we, as we want to use our knowledge from FiberPlanIT and optimizing fiber networks, we want to bring that knowledge to these other utility markets and play a role there. And for these kind of projects, we're always looking for industry partners, so that can help us to get information on the challenges in these different utility markets, and the challenges for planning these type of networks. So we want to learn from experienced companies in these fields, and really jointly develop the solution. So we're looking for partners that can work on with whom we can work on different use cases, and work out proof of concept, so that we can build a solution for planning networks in these for these different utilities. So if you're interested in one of the new developments that I showed, please feel free to reach out to me in case you have any further questions. So I don't know whether there are any questions related to the demo part. If you have any questions on new features for version 1.10, please feel free to ask so via the Q&A window. If you think of any questions after this session, please feel free to email me or to reach out to us via the contact page on our website. So I don't see any questions, so I'll just continue then. So I just want to thank you for the attention and highlight upcoming events where we will be present if you want to pass by and have a chat. So next week we'll be in Orlando for FiberConnect conference. Then in July we'll go to Canto in Dominican Republic, and then in September again we'll be in Orlando for the IZ Expo. And I think in October there's a Broadband World Forum in Berlin where we will be present. So I hope to meet you at one of these upcoming events. So thank you for your attention. If you have any further questions, please feel free to drop me an email, and please fill in the short survey after at the end of this webinar. Thank you.